Hi guys, good evening and welcome to this session. This session is all about migration, guys. We want to migrate a database from on-premise to AWS. What type of migration do you want to do? Want to do what is called a heterogeneous migration. No, let's do a homogeneous migration. So a homogeneous migration is migrating one type of database engine to the same type of database engine in the cloud space. The heterogeneous migration type is when you're migrating from one engine to a different type of engine in AWS. But the one we want to do today will be migrating from Microsoft SQL Server to Microsoft SQL Server. So it's a homogeneous migration we want to do. At enterprise level, when you are doing a serious migration project, there are some few prerequisites or things that you need to do before you get into the migration itself. And you can do that through the migration hub, the AWS migration hub. So it's like a central location from where you can actually move from step to step. It directs you on everything you have to do right up to the end. This is Primus Learning again. Welcome to our YouTube channel, guys. Hit the subscribe button. We're always here with really good content for you and for those who want to become really good architects and good users of the AWS platform. Now, I was mentioning about the AWS Migration Hub, which is a central location from where you can discover your environment. So if you're migrating from on-premise, and I mentioned in our use case that we'll be migrating SQL Server. So you want to discover the SQL Server environment, you want to access it and know the number of tables, the number of things that you have to migrate, or if you're doing an application migration, the number of applications, the type of instance that you would need and all of that, then you plan for your work through this same migration hub. And so there are tools that you use for discovery. There are tools that you use for analysis to discover and analyze and group servers into applications. Then there are tools that will help you with the right sizing and strategy and recommend a strategy for you to use for the migration. And then there are tools that will help you track the migration across different tools. And then, of course, there are tools that will help you with the actual migration. What we'll be doing here is an actual migration, and we're using the database migration service for that purpose. Now, if you're out there and you don't have an AWS account, you need an AWS account for this to follow up with this. And so once you create an AWS account, you can use an IAM user to log in with admin privileges and be able to do this. So the various things that you need to do include, first of all, that's a high level. First of all, you have to create a target location, right? So you have to create a target database where you want to migrate from the source to. So we have a database that's existing already. Where do you want to migrate that database to? That's what's referred to as the target database. So it assumes that you already have a source database, right? You already have some data somewhere. So our source database here is right here. So it's called the Primus Learning Products. So we have some tables here. Let's see the number of tables we have in this database. I think we have a few tables here. We have 2 tables or something. Yeah, we have 2 tables in here. We have the student table and we have the user one table. So we have the student table and the user one table. So we'll migrate the student table and the user one table. So those are the 2 tables we want to migrate. And our target database has been created as well. So you can look at our target database here. It's actually named target database. It doesn't have any table. So you can see here, there's no table, nothing, it's empty. So we want to migrate this database right here. We want to migrate it over to this database. So you'll be able to see the tables once our migration is done. And we're using the service called the AWS database migration service to do the migration. So we have the various databases. The source database is created in the AWS environment, just so you know. So this is it, it's running here, but it could be on-premise, right? Anywhere, it could be anywhere. So you could migrate it from Google, you can migrate it from on-premise servers. You just need the details of the servers and that's it. So you should have two databases existing. So the target database and of course your source database. So let's see the details of my databases. So to see the details of your databases, I will go to RDS where my databases are found. So we're going to RDS here, and these are the databases. These two, we have this one, which is our source database, and then we have a target database here. The target database is where we want to move data, and we are connected to it. How are we connected to it? We are connected to it through this endpoint. So this is the endpoint that we use to connect to it. This is the port we use to connect to it. It's all living in a VPC, this VPC right here. And the security group we used for it is this security group. You want to make sure the security group has access to, that they're operating within the same security group for easy access, since they are living within the same account. So to connect to it, to connect to the source database, I used Microsoft SQL Server. So this is Microsoft SQL Server, and I simply created a connection and used the endpoints as I just showed you. Now, let us go to the database migration service. So you understand that we have two things already. We have our database source, and we have our database target. They are all ready. You can create yours as well in the AWS environment and just follow. To create a database is really quick in AWS. You simply go on create. You see, you want to create a database, you select the database type that you want to create. For my case, I selected my Microsoft SQL Server. And then I left it as Amazon RDS, and I chose the SQL Server Express Edition. And I let everything default here to SQL Server version 2019. This is the version. And then I gave it a database name. So you just give a database name. And then I gave it a master username. You have to remember your master username, and you give it a master password. So you remember the master password and confirm it. And then you can leave it at this, depending. So this will depend on the type of database you have on premise. So if you have a large database, you want to change it to a large type of instance. So I'm going with the default because it is a very small migration we're doing. The storage, you can leave it as is. The connectivity, you make sure you select the right VPC right here. The VPC I selected is this one. And then the subnet group is this one right here. This is your subnet group. And you make sure that it is publicly accessible. So you have to select publicly accessible here to be able to discover the target. And then you choose a VPC security group. So for me, I chose this default security group, and I edited it to really have what we need. So there are some ports that needs to be open. So port 1433, since it's a SQL migration, needs to be open. And yeah, you need to have it. You need, well, when we reach there, you will discover it. You need to make sure that port is open. You need to make sure your replication instance has access to this database as well. So I will show you when we reach there. This is the amount this will cost you if you were to actually use this for a month. Once you've done all this, you simply hit on create. once you create, it will take a long time to create. That's why I created these things before now, so that we don't remain here. Else it takes like 15 minutes just to create the databases and be done. So that's what I did, and I have this right here ready, which is our source database. So once you create that, it will give you an endpoint that you will use to connect. It will give you a port. I did this, and then I ran some SQL commands on it. So I simply ran a create command to create tables. So I created a table called table one or user one with this. And then I created a second table called student. So this is the student that I created, and I also put some data inside. So this is the data that I used. So this is inserting into user one. So this is the insert statement here that I used. I'll provide this information down below at the end of the video, or the description of the video, so you can use it as well. And then for the student table, I inserted this data into it. I'll make this available as well. And that's why in here you can see two tables. There are two tables here, student table and the user one table. Those are the tables, and you can see the data for the student table. If you look for the data for user one, you will see the data as well. So let's just execute. You see the data for user one table. So these are the two tables we'll be migrating. And once you've had that, you simply need to create a connection here and connect to, connect to SQL Server. So you have to understand how SQL Server works and all of that. Once your connection is established, guys, you need to create a target one, same way you created the source database, and connect to it so that you see that it's empty, everything is empty. Same thing I did here, and I'm connected to this one through SQL Ectron. SQL Ectron is just another client used for connecting to databases, different databases. And to connect to SQL to SQL Ectron, you simply need to add a connection, and then you define a name. You give it a host, which is the endpoint I showed you in AWS, the user you created, like the master user I showed you earlier, and then the password you put, and that's it. You test your connection, select the database type, which is Microsoft SQL Server. It will give you the port automatically. So if you select Microsoft SQL Server, it already brings you the port 1433 here. And that's it. So that's what we did for the two databases. And so now let's go to the database migration service. So want to go to the database migration service, and this is the service right here, guys. It's a neat service. It is very good, very, very good, but you need to understand how it's used. The first thing you do when you get to the database migration service is you have to create a replication server. A replication server is like a midpoint between your source database and your target database. It needs to have a place where the data will sync up, where it will migrate, where your source database will be discovered, right? And where everything that is in the source database will be copied over to, such that it can use it to move to the target database. It needs something, it needs an instance running somewhere where that replication, where that movement of data would happen. That instance is called the replication instance, and this is what you have to create. It will take about 15 minutes to create this instance, and that's why I created it earlier than now, so that we have it and make this video quite short and not long. To create it, I will just show you the steps. It's simple. You give it a unique name. You see it says type a unique name for your replication instance. And then once you've created that, once you've put that, you don't need this. You can give it a description. This is the type of machine, DMS T2 medium. It will give you 2 vCPUs and 4 GB of memory. So you have to select this depending on the type of database you are migrating. So remember to select a good one depending on the database you're migrating. So at your discovery phase of the project, you needed to have known what type of data, the amount of data you're moving, and everything that you need. So you would have discovered that using the migration hub that we mentioned earlier. All right. Okay, so it's allocating 50 gigabytes for its storage here. And the VPC we're choosing is this one, the same VPC that we existed in while creating the database, such that the replication can take place correctly. And we want it to be a single availability zone. It's not a production workload, so we don't want it to be double. Should it be publicly accessible? Yes, you want it to be publicly accessible. And then for the security part, you want to make sure you use the replication subnet group, the same that you used while creating a database. And then availability zone, you use the same availability zone that you used while creating your database. For the VPC group, you use the same VPC group that you use while creating your database to make your life really easy. And then you want to encrypt it. You can use an encryption key that you created using Secrets Manager, or you use the default encryption key. In production, you should create your own encryption key and use. Then you can put some maintenance stuff, like maybe maintain it on these days, on Saturdays. You want to maintain your replication instance. Once you've put all the information, you simply hit create here, guys. You see it's unhighlighted. It's not highlighted here because we don't have all these values put in here. So let's go back. This is the same thing I did and created this migration, this replication instance. So it's active, it's available. You can see the details are the same as I pointed out up there. Just gave it a name called migration replication, and we are ready to go. Once you've created a replication instance, guys, the next thing you need to create is endpoints. There are 2 endpoints that you need to create. You need to create a target endpoint, and you need to create a source endpoint. A source endpoint will tell you the details, of the database you are moving data from. So it will tell you the details of the database you're moving data from. So you have to put like the endpoint where the data is coming from. So let me just show you how to create. I created these 2 earlier because I wanted it to go quicker, because it will take some time while creating. So the source endpoint, to create it, this is your source endpoint. You select that, and then you select where it is living, where your database is living. If it's living on premise, if it's living somewhere else, you select. Mine is living in AWS. That's why I'm selecting RDS here. So I chose the tag, my source database, which was this Primus Learning demo. And then it already picks up things because it's a AWS environment. And then I want to provide my details, my access information manually. You see, it will pick up the server name already because it's existing in AWS. So it picked up the endpoint that you used in connecting to the database. The port 1433, it picked it up. My username is this, my password, you have to give that master password. Remember the master password while creating. And then the database name, you have to give it a database name. So I created a database in here called Primus Learning Products. With SQL Server, you have to create a database first, a database, so, or a schema, whatever. I created mine called Primus Learning Products. So that's the database you give here. So you put the database name, and then you choose wizard, leave it at wizard here, default. KMS keys, you encrypt it. You want your data to be encrypted as it is moving. So you encrypt it, I will use default here. Once you've done that, you can add tags and test. You have to make sure it's running. But before testing, make sure it's in the same VPC. If it's in the same VPC and there's a replication instance, so you have to have a replication instance before this step can be done. Once you've had a replication instance, you run tests to see if it's successful. So if it's successfully connected to the source database. So mine is successful. That's why I created it. Once it's successful, you have to test. Once it's successful, then you create your endpoint. After creating your endpoint, yes, I want to leave. That's the source endpoint. You have to create a second endpoint, which is the target endpoint, guys. You have to necessarily create the target endpoint. And now to create a target endpoint, mine was successful as well. To do that, you simply go to create again, hit create. This time you're creating target. So you select target right here, target endpoint. And then where is the target database? Is it in RDS? If it's in RDS, you select RDS. And then you define the target database. This is target database name. It will automatically discover the endpoint identifier because the target endpoint is in AWS. And so you see, you can select the target engine, which is Microsoft SQL Server. If it were something else, you would select from here, but we have SQL Server, our target engine, because remember we said we're doing a homogeneous migration. I want to provide our information here. That's access information. I want to manually put it. And the port is 1433 because it's Microsoft SQL Server again. Our username is this. Remember the master username we created when I was showing you how to create a database. And then you have a password. So you have to put a password here. Remember where we said you have to put a password in when we're creating a database. And then you have to give it a database name. Remember, you have to create an empty database, and that's logical database. So I've created a database called target database. This is the name here, target database. I'm connected to it right here. Remember, there's no table here. So we're migrating data over to this database. Remember, I'm just using SQL Electron as a client to be able to connect to that database. There's no way to connect to that database except you use this client or another client. I'm just using two different clients here for the two databases. I have a source database, which is running here, which I'm opening here, which I'm using SQL Server Studio, Management Studio to connect to. And then I have a target database, which I'm using SQL Electron to connect to. I just want to make this clear, guys. So once you've had your target database, this is what you put onto the endpoints here. So you put the target and the database, the target database name here. And then make sure your endpoint settings are correct. Make sure your KMS keys are correct. And then you want to test it by, first of all, providing the VPC, and then your replication instance is the same replication instance that you created up here. Remember, the first thing we had to do was create a replication instance. Now, once you've done that, you simply have to run tests, guys. Run tests and it's successful, then you create your endpoint. That's all you do. Once it's successful, you create your endpoint. So we've created two endpoints. I just wanted to demo how you create them. Those are the two endpoints here. Now, after that, the next thing that you do is to define your migration task by going to the database migration tasks. So I haven't created a database migration task yet. That is what we'll be doing. So let's create a migration task and give it a task identifier. So a name, a unique identifier for the task. So we'll call this one Primus Learning task. Then we'll leave it at that. Description, we'll just copy this. Is there a description? No, not description. What replication instance are we moving from? This is the replicate. We have just one replication instance. This is the replication instance we want to use. Source database endpoint. This is the source database endpoint. The target database endpoint. Ooh, it's not picking up our target database endpoint. Source database endpoint. Yes, this is a source database endpoint, a target database endpoint. Why is it not seeing our target database endpoint and we have it running? So let's go back to our endpoints. We want to make sure we have, oh goodness, looks like no, we should have our this is our target database endpoint. And this is the name right here. I don't know why it's not picking it up. I would just copy the ARN. If it doesn't have, we'll probably use it. So let's go back to the migration tasks, create again. Primus learning task. Replication instance, we select that. It's actually not select. Choose a target database endpoint. Oh, probably we missed it when we were creating the endpoints. We surely did not click on. So you see an error that we committed. We did not, we'll have to modify this. So we didn't say that it was a target endpoint. So guys, you have to be able to figure these things out really fast. And so let's give it, I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. Target endpoint. So let's save and see and test again. I want to test if this is okay. This endpoint settings, schema connection. We want to test this connection because we modified it, right? So connection is being tested. Let's see if it's successful. If it's successful, then we'll have our endpoint available now when we're creating a migration task. Yes, so it's successful, guys. We're ready to go. Let's go back to our database migration tasks and create task. So we give it a task name, Primus learning task. Just leave this. Then we choose a replication instance, the replication instance we created earlier, guys. And then we choose the source database endpoint. Now it has one source database endpoint and the target database endpoint is now showing up. So the type of data we want to migrate or the type of migration we want to do. So there are three types: migrate existing data, and replicate ongoing changes, replicate data changes. So we want to do migrate and replicate. This one is the one we want to choose for this. When switching database engines, the AWS schema conversion tool can automatically convert your database schema and code to the engine of your choice. Click. So we're not using the conversion tool. We use the conversion tool if we were doing if we were doing a heterogeneous migration, that is moving from one engine to a different type of engine. For instance, moving from SQL Server to Oracle or moving from SQL Server to Aurora, we would have to use a conversion tool, which is the schema conversion tool. But for this use case, we are not using a schema conversion tool. Disable custom CDC. We want to leave all of these, drop tables on target. If there are tables that are already existing on target, you have to drop them. So this is what the options we are taking. Stop task after full load completes. Don't stop. Stop before applying cache. Now we want to leave it at the default. Leave it at default here. Enable validation. If you want the DMS to compare the data at the source and the target immediately after it performs a full data load, so you can do that. CloudWatch logs if you want logs. So you can do that just to see the logs as they're flowing. So some advanced tasks here. Create control table in target using schema. We want to leave it as is. We don't want to do anything here. Specify at least one selection rule with an include action. After you do this, you can add one or more transformation rules. So I think everything looks good here, guys. We can create our migration task automatically on create. So once we do create here, you automatically do the create for us. So we'll set up our migration task. So once we create, so we've taken the option to automatically start the process of migration once it is created. So we'll click on this, but before then, I think we need to add a rule. Choose the schema and tables you want to include with or exclude from your migration task. So you can actually choose which schema you want to include. So the schema, enter a schema. So the schema should just be like your database name, right? So for this one, the schema is Primus Learning Products. So that's the schema. Primus Learning Products. Then we're using a wildcard here for everything to mean everything. Action to choose include to migrate your selected objects or exclude to ignore them. So we're choosing include. And that's it. So guys, we are ready to go. We can hit create right here. And the process has begun. Our migration is on the way. So let's watch this and see what happens with the migration. So the Primus Learning creation in progress. The Primus Learning task creation is in progress. So the task is creating, it will create and automatically start the replication process. So it's moving data already from one place to another. It's moving data from the target or from the source, which is this database right here. Let me just show it one more time on this database. So we're expecting that after the migration, we'll be able to see two tables in the target database. We'll be able to see the student table and the user one table in the target database. So we'll be expecting that when we come in here and refresh, we'll see two tables, the student table and the user one table. And what is helping us do the migration? It is the AWS database migration service. This is a really, really, really neat tool, guys. And for those who have done migrations, you know that it is a very big thing in AWS. If you are an AWS solutions architect, you know it is something that they hire people and pay them very well to do. So please follow this up, share with your friends, and let more people learn how to do migrations using the AWS DMS service. It is called a DMS service because it's the database migration service. So this will take a while. I think I will have to pause this recording and then we'll restart it again just so you don't get bored by the migration process. We'll start off when it reaches 100%. I will not do anything. I will just keep it as is and we'll just bring it up to you once it is at 100%. Hey guys, we're back here. Sorry, it's been going for long. The silence has been long. Anyway, we are successful with our second task. So the first task failed. The reason for it failing is that we selected full load and ongoing replication. That was what made it to fail. The second, so when it failed, I looked for the reason and saw that, and I just decided to create a second replication task, and I didn't include full load and ongoing replication. So I selected, you know, just full load, and that's it, load complete. So it's all done, ready to go, guys. So our replication is successful. Progress is 100%. We're all good to go. If you look at our logs, you will see what happened. So if you go to CloudWatch, You'll be able to see the logs and see whatever thing happened in the process of our migration. So we can go to our target database and see what took place and all the actions. But yeah, this is the migration. It's complete. Everything is ready. Let us visit. We can visit CloudWatch later and see what happened. So for now, let us navigate to the target database, which is supposed to be this database right here. So if, for instance, we go out of here and come back in, and then we select our database, voila, here we go. We can see tables here, guys. Hopefully we'll see two tables, and these are our two tables. This is the data, guys. It's all good to go. This is the other table. This is the data. Looks same way, so you have to check if the data is all good, looking good, looking good. And then if it's same as it was on your other database. These are other databases, how it looks. And guys, our migration was successful. It was a full load, and we did migrate two databases, two tables, sorry. One table called the student table, another table called the user one tables, and we are able to verify that it is available in our target database. Remember always to clean up, guys. After doing your migration, remember to clean up, else you have a ton of bills adding up on you. So you don't want to have that. You just want to really see your thing. So this is evidence of the migration. You see table statistics, two tables migrated, and this is what happened. So you see full load rows, see everything as expected. The time it did migrate and all of that, you can export this in an CSV file and see it. If you selected pre-migration assessment, you'll see the assessment that it did here, but we didn't select that. So you can just see your overview of the migration here, everything that it did. This is the task settings for JSON. This is what it did. And that's it, guys. What I would do now is I would delete my task. I don't need them anymore. I've completed my migration. So I'm just deleting them. I will delete my replication instance. I don't need it anymore. So I can go to actions and do delete. But I think I will leave this one this way. I will not delete because I may have another session. So I will, yeah, I think I can delete. I don't need it for now. It doesn't give me the opportunity to stop it, so I will delete it. So I'm deleting this one. Endpoints, I can leave the endpoints. They are not costly. I will leave them for now. As for my databases, so let me go to my databases. RDS, to go to RDS, I'll just stop them from running. And that's it, guys. I'll just stop the databases because I'll use them in another session. I have another session with a group of people coming up. So I will just leave these. I'll just stop them. Stop, stop. And for this one, I'll hit stop again. Stop, stop, and stop. And that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and comments. Leave your comments, civil and good. All of us are on a journey to become AWS architects or AWS engineers or AWS users. Good luck with your processes and have a good time. Bye-bye.